Okay, look, so Obscure SMP, the administration is that's not what I meant to do.
What?
Obscure SMP, the administration is an onion, right? Now onions, they have layers, right? Like that's the reason why I call this the onion, right? Is because onions have layers. That's the entire point of this, right, guys? Now in the center of this onion is someone who you may not expect, and it is Rayex. Rayex, despite not being the owner technically, is like undoubtedly at the center of the onion. He's the center of the onion, undoubtedly. Being in the center means that you are, and this is actually a good question for the honest. Being in the center means that you are the center of everything. You are well insulated from the masses. You might not be even the most public person, because a lot of the times the public people are on the outside of the onion, right? But you are in the center. You are the one in control of everything. You are the core. Now, if we're he's the only one who I'd say is truly in the center, because we have a few other people, right? Now, obviously, we all know V. What does that stand for? Volonid. Volonid's like pretty clearly in this outer layer. I would also say Confused, but Confused is an interesting one. Blurry is like kind of on the line, but he definitely would be, because if we're talking about Obscure in general, he's definitely on that. Although if we're talking about purely the SMP itself, he's probably more like here. Now what gets more interesting is when we get into this ring. This ring is where I think both me and Ian lie. You see, because me and Ian, we both have some influence on the center, which is Ray. Because Ray is where all obscure power comes from, right? So I'm going to color code. Ian's gonna be this color. In now you may be thinking, Creeper, why is Ian like perfectly in the center? He's not, because I actually fully believe that Ian is actually kind of really close to being further in the center. Now, people may disagree with this. This is a controversial place to put Ian, but he has, and you're gonna find this in the future. I would argue that Ian actually has more control than Confused, but we're gonna talk about that later. So Ian's probably there. I'd say that I'm probably like here, maybe, although I feel like I kind of move in and out depending on like who I talk to. And but here's the thing, is that my placement is always relative to Volonid's. So when Volonid is more inside, I'm also closer on the inside. And when Volonid's more on the outside than I am, there's not really a reason for this, other than, like, I guess I'm kind of friends with Volonid, but I'd say that I'm closer with Rex than I am with Volonid necessarily. But, so that's the interesting thing about me. Ian can more stand on his own, so he's more stable in his placement, although it still does change. In fact, his actually seems to be kind of counter to Confused. So when Ian is closer to inside the circle, Confused is actually more out, and vice versa. So when Confused actually takes power, which is very rare, Ian is usually the one who is at the detriment from that. Now, is there anyone... Cam. Cam's an interesting one, because Cam kind of floats... Actually, no, we're going to need to add more rings to this. Because I'm now going to... Because this ring is your average obscure member. I'm going to use Kuro as an... Although, Kuro, once again, is a weird member, because Kuro's, like, simultaneously everywhere. Yeah, Kuro has dot rule in the private, which is something that would be in this circle. But also has, like, some impact on decisions, which is, like, this circle. But also simultaneously doesn't, which is something that this circle would be. So Kuro is everywhere. Kuro is omnipresent. In fact, that's why I'm actually going instead of drawing Kuro's name, I'm going to just make it a text box instead, because I don't understand it. But let's take a more normal member. Like, let's say, Bullet! Yeah, Bullet. Bullet's like the most normal member you could get. He's inactive, he doesn't do shit. So he's probably... Although I'd say, and this is where activity comes into play, Bullet's like kind of more closer to like the edge. But once again, he's still a member. Now what's interesting is that then you have members who are like kind of members, kind of not. Like Big G. Big G is a member of the server, but he's not considered a member by the entirety of the ownership, even though he is a member. So he's probably here. Someone like Cam is like simultaneously here, but also here. Fun fact. Cam is another person, kind of like Kuro. But Kuro's not in this position. Cam's more in like a superposition between like being a normal member and being like pretty influential to the extent of me or Ian. He changes like pretty often. Now, let's talk about someone who I think is like pretty interesting. New members. Where do new members fit into this? So Eastern Mage is also here, but Eastern Mage is kind of more inside, I guess. Kind of, maybe. And Eastern Mage's trajectory should be that they're going to get more inside. But realistically, you can't get much further than here without being like really special or good at art. So, or autistic. Because fun fact, there's also a correlation with the further you are in here, the more neurodivergent you are. Fun fact. Like, think about it.
Huh?
Bullet is like probably normal. Then you have fucking Ray-X. My point is made. And that's also why Kuro is in this superposition, because I don't know what the Kuro Mary is. Now, I said that Eastern Mage is more interesting. No, Confused is actually the most interesting, because Confused, actually, let me get an image. Wait, no, I can't do that, because Adobe sucks. Or not Adobe, whatever the fuck this is. Okay, so, have you ever heard of the term Schrodinger's cat?
Yes, I keep hearing it in my English, but I never figured out what it was.
English? So Schrodinger's cat is the idea of like a superposition between two things, although that's just an example. Basically you have a box, and inside the box is a cat. Now the cat is either dead or alive. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how Confused is. Because Confused is in this box. Wait, actually let me expand this actually to
I
properly
learned about
demonstrate.
this in English.
Yeah, I don't know why you learn about this in English, but okay, so let's say there's this box right now. This box represents ownership of the SMP. And inside here is a little Confused. You know, there's his like little thing, there's his dreads, there's his little sad face because he's always depressed, there's his legs or his arms or something, there's his hands. Inside this little box is Confused. Now this box is closed right now, because we don't know what the fuck he's doing. So Confused is in this very interesting spot that no other member is in, where he is simultaneously like right about here, arguably in here, but he is simultaneously right here. Because what the fuck is he doing as an owner? No one knows. We don't know what he's doing. So simultaneously he has like some of the most control of anyone in the server, but he's also simultaneously create like 30 more onion layers right here, and somehow Stars is like above him in some regard. Also if you're wondering, Ian guests are like probably about here. Ian guests are probably like about there. Stars is here. Confused is right here, and right here simultaneously. Schrodinger's cat. He's in a superposition between these spots. So you may say, oh well, it averages to here, but he is not here because he's in the server. Kind of, but he's also not at all. He's the least active member and also the most active at the same time. And if you're wondering where Icy is right now, Icy is probably like about here.
Remember?
Yeah, he's like, I would say Chia Games is like the average, you know? And I think this also represents what the real scale of this is okay, so have you ever heard of horseshoe theory? Okay, so basically a horseshoe looks like this, right? And this is often used to simulate politicism. Now here we have now here we have normal. Here we have, wait, am I doing this right? Yeah, yes, I'm doing this right. Okay, here we have neurodivergent. So the center here, right, is like kind of is in between normal and neurodivergent, right? So let's say probably this is where you put someone like, I don't know, Cheetah, maybe. So and this is like the death spiral position. You do not want to be in between normal and neurodivergent. Oh, Ian,
right there.
You either want to be one of the most autistic motherfuckers, or alternatively, you want to be like relatively. Oh wait, I forgot to circle blur, by the way. Or alternatively, you want to be like somewhat normal, kind of, right? Now that's why someone like Cheetah will never be in like a strong position, is because Cheetah is like is probably autistic, but not autistic enough to be at the level of like, well, also not normal enough to be at the level of, you know, say a Confused. Or like sometimes someone else is normal. I don't know who. So yeah, Stars is another interesting one, because Stars, I would argue, is actually more autistic than like even give like a Cam, an Eastern Mage, Confused, maybe even a Volinid, right? Probably more autistic than those people. But that's actually stopping them because because like you could spot all of them on this line over there. But then you have fucking Stars, who by the way is the person who made the Rex Goons edit, if you're wondering, who's probably like
Oh.
here. But that's closer to the center, which is okay, so have you ever heard of the Uncanny Valley, right? So the Uncanny Valley
No.
so the Uncanny Valley is like a term. It's usually like used in coordination with AI, where like, or let me. It's more like, so like, have you ever? So like AI, right?
Yeah.
Like let's say a robot. So, and yes, I'm going to be comparing autistic people to robots.
What?
Because as an autistic person, I identify as a robot. But like here, you would have like a normal robot, aka Tism, and and over here you have like confused MCBE. Right? And in
Confused.
here and in here, and this is just another way of saying the horseshoe theory, because and I think this is a better thing. This is where you don't want to be as an obscure member. You don't want to be in between normal and neurodivergent, right? So okay, so I just realized that I didn't really explain, because I only explained how I move when Volnid moves, but basically here's how the obscure dynamics work. You're either in two camps. You are either more closely related to Volnid, in which I will kind of try to circle you in blue, Blurry. Blurry is his own creature. Let's say people related more to Rex. Like, that's kind of a weak connection. I'm going to bring down the opacity because of that. And then also, let's talk about Ian. Ian is so interesting because Ian has the Ray that's not Ray. Sorry. Ian is probably more connected to Ray, but he also simultaneously has the blurry ring. He's also simultaneously related to like kind of also Vaughn in a way. Also me. Also every single other person in the server. Ian is always going to be like in this general radius. He can't move because when he stops being like closely related to someone, he just kind of flops to a different person. So basically what I'm saying is this, is when Volnid gains more power, it positively affects me, Kuro, Biggie, and anyone else who's related to Volnid. But when that doesn't happen, and when Volnid actually loses power, that negatively affects all of us, but also positively affects people like Ian and Bullet, who then end up taking up that position. Because the average of every obscure member will always be like around this area. Maybe more over here. Because there always has to be equilibrium, basically. Unless there's a massive influx of members, in which you'll obviously just have more members here. Probably not more people in leadership positions. But even then, I don't know. So what I'm saying is that if I'm not in this role, someone will replace me. Whether that be Bullet, Cheetah, Ian, whoever. Although I would also argue that I'm kind of connected to Ray, but I think I genuinely kind of ebb and flow more with Volnid due to the fact that we're similar characters, in my opinion. So, okay,
Well, it doesn't really affect me.
I fully disagree. So let's plot a graph, right, of people's general power, right, throughout the server. Rex is like pretty consistently. Rex is pretty consistently like kind of around here. The only dips that Rex has in power are like between seasons, most likely, where he either decides to stop being owner, in which case someone else will take his place, like Volnid will randomly rise. Volnid is also relatively stable, right? Or no, but here's the thing: is that Volnid actually goes the opposite way of Ray, because once again, whenever one person's power decreases relative, the other person's power does the opposite. Downward spikes like this is when Obscure just isn't doing that well, and then no one actually like everyone loses relative power inside the server's political system, because yes, Obscure is like there's a strong political philosophy here. So what I'm saying is that the power of Ray is usually pretty stable. Same with Volnid. Now the rest of us, we ebb and flow a lot more. But if you notice, like for instance me, in fact, I actually don't think I'm a good example of this, so I'm actually going to put Kuro. Kuro's red. So I think Kuro, and specifically Kuro, because Kuro has such a strong connection to Volnid, and not as much to Ray. There's kind of a connection to Ray. Like, there's obviously something there, but I will say when Volnid gains power, that disproportionately affects Kuromari more than even Volnid, because Volnid always has that like Volnid can't really go below here without just being a member, which he'll never be because he'll always be like a co-owner for the most part. At least with this current regime. They may be asking where is Confused. Confused once again is simultaneously down here and up here at the same time. In fact, let me Confused. Confused once again. Wait, no, not there. Sorry. He's kind of like hypothetically fighting with Ray for control of the server, but realistically, he's always going to be down here, sometimes below Kuro, arguably. And that's once again brings us to the superposition. He's in both here and here at the same time simultaneously. He's not in the middle. He's in both these positions. Welcome to Obscure. Now let's say someone like Ian. So let's say Ian is riding the Ray train. It's going well, but then Ray has a dip. He actually continues to go up. They may be asking, why is this? And it's because when Ray decreases, now this actually isn't represented well by the graph, but when Ray decreases, it tends to be more than anyone else increases. And Ian is usually the one who picks that up. So Ian will usually just pick that up. Basically, the only way that Ian can go down is when every single other person goes down. But then he'll rise back up again, and then he'll go down again. Ian is kind of like the company of Google. He only goes down when everyone else is kind of fucking up, and even then he sometimes stays up. Fun fact, if you look at Google's earnings right now, they're actually doing pretty well. Or not earnings, if you look at their stock price, like I was looking at the stock price of some companies today, which it's fluctuating a lot right now, but it's doing a lot better than their competitors because I don't fucking know, I'm not good at stocks. But speaking of money, Green is me. Now, I think I'm in a similar position to Ian. I think me and Ian will always be kind of in a similar thing. I think I'm like a little bit below Ian, but then sometimes I pass him up. Sometimes I don't. Probably not in that place because I'd say I'm more connected with Volnid while he's more connected with Ray, which actually isn't shown that well by this graph because one, he's like slightly too high. But let me fix Ian. Okay, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? Is that when Volnid succeeds, Crow succeeds, Ian stays the same. But when Ray succeeds, Volnid goes down usually. Crow goes down a lot more actually. Confused is still confused. Oh, that's why his name's Confused. Fucking hell, it's because of his quantum superposition between two states of power in the Obscure SMP. And then Ian goes and then Ian goes up. And then what happens when nothing happens is Ian goes up, and then when something happens, Ian goes down. Is basically the idea. Ian is very independent. Ian's the only one who I would say, like, kind of is more connected than the owners. And even then it's... Oh, wait, speaking of that, let me quickly...
They're the best duos in Obscure.
Duos, by the way, this actually affects the graph a lot. Because the perceived duos of Obscure does kind of change this. Now, at first, obviously, you had the Rex Volo duo was the main duo of Obscure. And that's why, for the first few seasons, if we take this graph and we decide to put it back in time, so far back in time, that's actually three-dimensional now.
What? What the fuck?
Well, welcome to Obscure, guys. But if we go back in time, you'll see that Rex's power in the server is basically the same as Volnid's because they were a duo. That has stopped because the dynamic has shifted. It's not about Rex and Volo anymore. It's actually about whoever they're with. Ray's new duo seems to be like kind of... Ray's duo is confusing. It shifted earlier, it was Robin.
This really was expandable.
So earlier, Ray's like main duos were Robin. Then Robin got axed, and then it was Sprightly, but then Sprightly left. Then it was kind of me and Ian, but then like that kind of didn't work because he annoyed both of us too much. And then before then it was actually as I mentioned Volo. But then Volo kind of like got annoyed at him. So now his current duo is Kingblade, right? Like we all agree that it's Kingblade. But this is
Yep.
almost bound to fail realistically, and I hate to say this because even though they obviously love each other very much, they give each other kisses past bedtime. Despite that, I have doubts just because of the history. Because if we look at Rayx and Kingblade right now, there's parallels to Rayx and Volo. How did I spell it with an R? I don't know how I spelled Volo, did that wrong. But the parallelism is there. And then with Volo's much more stable. His duos currently are like me, Blurry, kind of Kuro.
No. I'm
I
not
would
a good
argue
duo Volo.
I would argue yes, but only like in the presence of someone else. Like someone else needs to be there, so there's kind of like a little asterisk there. I need to work on like my faux cursive. Like, I don't think this looks bad, but it doesn't look good either. Anyway, so that's understanding the duos of Obscure, which do run this. Which like that's the entire reason why I'm saying, like, for instance, my power is linked to Volanids in the server is because I'd consider us kind of a duo now. I mean, I was the first person we collaborated with, so kind of. Ian doesn't have a duo because he's best friends with everyone. Everyone loves him. Let me put a little heart over him to indicate that. Because everyone loves him except for when they don't. So anyway, let's expand the graph one more time. Okay. So Ian is interesting, right? Because here's the thing about Obscure that many people don't understand is that Ian, and actually, let me make an entire. I'm glad I already expanded it. Ian is like his own whole dimension of Obscure. In fact, I already have this onion right here, but there's another onion within this onion. I don't think I could make a fucking whole onion. And I won't. So like right here, act like this onion is like being. The onion is there, but really the onion is actually here, which is where you're gonna be able to see the results from that onion. Welcome to the Ian Orped onion. Now in this onion, this one changes a lot more often. So obviously in the center you have Ian. Other notable figures are Banana, who I would say is in like this section of the Ian Orp server onion. By the way, this isn't the Ian onion, this is like specifically his server, which while Ian is de facto always going to be number 1, number 2, 3, 4, and 5 are not necessarily the admins of the server, it's the people who have the most influence, which Banana had a lot of control because he had people like Saf, he had people like even I think Segs was in the server at some point, And obviously, he's friends with Ian. They love each other very much. I'm gonna put an end there, but it's gonna be a different color because I don't fucking know. But then you also have the other group, which is like the obscure people. And of these, I think the person who probably has the most power in Ian server, who's like an obscure member, is there's like a few people competing for it. But I'd say right now, I don't think any of these people reach the banana category. But I'm going to put like myself probably in this category. I'm gonna put Kuro a little higher in this category, but still in the same category. Actually, I'm going to once again put Kuro in like every category because I think that's just kind of how Kuro is. I don't know if that's actually accurate to the server, but I think it's funny if Kuro is everywhere all the time.
I am
this font's small. Yeah, Kuro is inevitable. Let me make this font size 300. There we go. That's okay. I'm not able to move that text now, so that text is there. Kuro's there. Ray's probably also here. Valo's probably like here. Confused is once again like simultaneously here and also here. Because welcome to Obscure. Oh, Blurry! Blurry's the one who's like probably the furthest in the circle from Obscure. So yeah, but I may saying this isn't actually answering Ian's question. How does Ian stand alone? Well, here's the thing. Look, now let's create another fucking graph. Anyway, so like Ian and Ian's server is always here. What you don't understand is Ian is constantly being supported by a rising and falling group of dynasties. For a while,
What?
I would say we had the main obscure dynasty, which I'm going to label in purple. Now, for a while, now we're not going to talk about the pre-obscure days. We're going to talk about obscure, right? But then you notice obscure seemed to fall. I remember because when I first got my, I noticed that Banana's group, who are a distinct group from obscure, even though he was in obscure at the time, Banana's group, which has always been present, had just like kind of gone through the roof in terms of their popularity. in the Ian server. They were dominating the VCs, like they were up there. But then they kind of fell off because they started using the JJS server again. So that led to Obscure kind of coming back, but in a different way. And that's when this is like around the Skyblock days, when I think like I was probably more in it. Let's say this is me and Spritey, because I think that was like around the time when Spritey kind of peaked as well, which is when I would say I also peaked. And but eventually after these, this reminds me of ancient China, right?
Wait,
You
I
have
need it down with
rising and
Arc
falling
Raiders.
dynasties, but now we're kind of at an equilibrium, right? All the warring factions are kind of at a safe place right now. Everyone's happy, although not really, and that's where the Ian server is right now. But what I'm saying is that even though different people rise and fall, right, as you can see here, Ian, through his connection with all these groups of people, whether it be me, Volo, Ray, Banana, any of them, he always manages to stay on top because he drifts to a different person. He changes his allegiances. Let me expand the graph for you real quick. So once again, I'm going to there's a few factions I would say that are a part of Obscure. Let me go back to the Obscure side of the graph. Actually, I did not need to expand this. There's still like plenty of space here. I actually barely even need to expand this ever. The blurry faces, I would say like there's like a micro faction within all of these that's like from and everyone has these like their own micro factions within these. I'm not going to include Ian's because Ian I'm putting on the graph. Actually, I'm not even going to include myself because there's no reason to. And then Confused is kind of out here, but simultaneously also here because welcome to Obscure SMP. But the main thing we're going to talk about is Volunid, Ray, and Blurry, because even though Blurry's is probably the small, like I'm gonna actually let me adjust Blurry's because he should be like way smaller than the other two. And then Blurry's is like this because it's like basically just like him and Yamka. Ian is one of the only people who manages to be in the center of all of these people while also being in the center of there. He's in the center of every single or not in the center. He's near the center of every single person's independent onion. Which, by the way, these are all fucking onions. Fuck you. We're back to onions. Wait, let me. Because I forgot to make these onions earlier.
Do?
Ian is the only person who manages to be here. He's both aligned with everyone and also in the center of all of their onions. He's so fat he crosses over the barriers. He's everywhere. Now you're asking, where is Kuro in all this? Kuro's there.
Does Kuro have her own thing that Kuro marries?
Kuro's actually this is probably where Kuro is, if I'm gonna be honest. That's actually probably like an accurate assessment of where Kuro is. Okay, so basically my short thesis is that every social interaction you ever have in your life is guided by these onions. These onions are obviously not real things, but you have to remember that onions have layers, and you have to think, where do I lie in my social group? Your goal should always be to become close to the center of every onion you're in, right? Now, your onion can be anything. It can be like your class in school. It could be your friend group. It could be the group chat that you send racist memes in. It could be Obscure SMP. Even if you're not in Obscure SMP, you're still in the onion. Every single person on Earth is in one of these onions. For instance, Barack Obama is in the Obscure onion. He's probably like about here. But that's what I'm saying is that every single person is in an onion, and your goal should always be to be in the center or as close to the center of every onion, because that means that you have control, and having control over people is the most powerful thing you could do. And that's my thesis. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I really appreciate this. So yeah, that's the end.